I'm Dylan.
And I'm Keon.
And I'm JB.
And this is Trust Your Doctor, that podcast that isn't an emotion, it's a promise. Because this week we watched Dark Water and Death in Heaven.
Written by Steven Moffat.
Directed by Rachel Talalay. Still haven't looked up how to say her name properly.
I believe it is Talalay.
Yes.
Nice. It aired on November 1st and November 8th, 2014.
Right. We made it through the intro. So we're joined this week, as we mentioned on last week's episode that hasn't gone out when we were recording this, that we were being joined by JB Anderton.
Hello.
So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Been looking forward to this for a couple weeks now, actually.
Yeah.
So have I. I'm a little bit I haven't done this in a little while as far as recording a Doctor Who podcast. I've actually... my podcast, Who 37, a Doctor Who podcast, is actually kind of on a hiatus at the moment. Did state that the last episode was the last episode, but I'm starting to feel like, well, maybe like Kiss, I'll just come back, slap the makeup on, and go out on stage again. And
I was going to say, you're going to pull a 42 to Doomsday, you release your final episode, and then a year later have so many contentious opinions that you just have to release another episode.
Pretty much. What's really
funny, I love
funny
42 to Doomsday, though, by the way. I'm not ragging on them.
Oh, no. Those are like a handful of Doctor Who podcasts I still listen to. Whenever they put one out, I make sure to listen. What's really funny is that I actually, the last episode I recorded was back in January. And last month, I still had like 700 downloads for June. That's like the most downloads I've had in quite a while. So
wow.
People are still listening to Who 37. I guess maybe discovering it for the first time and going, down my back catalog, which I haven't even dared to do.
Yeah, nice. No, I mean, there's definitely, if you've, built up a library and stuff like that, you'll definitely, see the returns on that, I think, continually.
Yeah. So I'm thinking probably maybe around the time series 12 is going to start, I might pop my hat. It won't be as frequent as in the past because I don't think I'm going to be able to keep up that pace because I'm actually, I recorded another podcast, which is a Batman 1970s podcast. And I am going to soon be doing a sequential review of all the Batman and Detective comics that were published in the 1970s. That's going to take me at least 2 years to get through.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I know almost nothing about the world of comic books, but I mean, that just sounds like a very monumental task. But fun.
Yeah,
but,
it's really, I mean, I'm more of a fan of the television show and the cartoons. I mean, I was a kid in the 1970s. So the podcast actually started out just looking at all of that. And I was only going to do maybe a couple episodes on the comics. But then I did some soul searching and thought, well, it would probably be a much more interesting show if I actually looked at all these comic books, which, I mean, I remember some of them, but there's a lot of it that I don't know. So it's going to be, it's sort of like your 50-something-year-old geek from Chicago is going to go back and look at all these comic books and just see how much they've aged, how much they've dated, and just kind of see the development of that character. Because a lot of things that we know about the character now happened in the comic books during the 1970s.
Well, that's certainly interesting. I don't know how many podcasts there are out there that look at comic books specifically. I know there's an incredible amount that look at comic book movies and comic book TV shows.
I think they're out there.
I mean, I'm sure they're out there. I just don't know how prominent it is.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I do know of one podcast that's looking at the first year of Spider-Man, the Steve Ditko and Stan Lee Spider-Man, in the 60s. But I think they're only doing the first year of those.
Okay. Well, that's an exciting project, I think.
Yeah.
We can look forward to it. You heard it here first, folks.
I mean, unless you've heard it elsewhere first.
Yeah. I didn't say you heard it here first. I just said you heard it here, folks.
Oh.
Yes, I'll make sure to plug the podcast at the end of the show because I know that's when you usually do that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, so I guess we could just jump right into Dark Water, Death in Heaven.
yeah, production type stuff.
Was there much production about
yeah,
this?
there wasn't much.
I know I read the Doctor Who magazine page on it.
Yeah, I skimmed that as well. It was mostly just Steven Moffat. Kind of just, it wasn't so much talking about the production so much as it was just kind of like teasing the episode in a way.
And stroking his own ego in some ways.
I do actually have a little bit of flavor text for the production notes.
Okay.
Okay, so this was supposed to have been Clara's last episode.
Right, as was next week's episode.
Yeah, this was actually supposed to be the one that Clara bows out, but then Jenna Coleman read the script and it's like, oh, I changed my mind. I want to stay. And so that actually, Moffat had actually written the next episode as Clara's exit, but he really didn't want Jenna Coleman to leave either. So he actually wrote an alternate ending, which actually became the actual ending of next week's episode. So this is we're going to be seeing, I think, Clara's second or third departure scene with more to come.
Well, we've already had one this season after Kill the Moon, where she's like, I don't want to travel with you, Doctor, anymore. And then they go to the Orient Express and she's like, this is the last adventure. I swear, this is the final one. Cross my heart, hope to die.
I'm also counting Dalek Clara and Victorian Clara.
Ah, yes. So there's two more right there.
So there's three, and I think there may be like four more coming.
Nice.
There's at least the one next week, and I can think of two next season, so that makes three.
Yeah, she's multifaceted, a woman of many departures.
A woman of many departures.
At this point, she's become Moffat's Rose.
A little bit. I think so. I remember actually on that topic of this being the last episode, I remember when I watched this, because I watched this when it aired, I remember there being speculation that this was supposed to be her last episode, because I don't think it had been confirmed at that point.
The ending would really heavily indicate that to be the case if you didn't know it was coming.
Yeah, I actually remember when that came out. There was, for as far as I heard, that was going to be it. And then, like a week later, it was actually I was at Chicago TARDIS, which is the local Doctor Who convention here, and I started hearing rumors about, well, maybe not. Maybe she's going to stick around.
Let her go, Moffat. Let her go.
Let her go.
Well, I also remember there being a lot of speculation. I remember there being a lot of speculation when it came out that because it was her last episode, that originally Moffat was going to reveal that she was pregnant, and that was the thing that she had written the post-it note "Just Say It" for, and that was why she was being written out. And
I did not hear that, but that would have been a logical way to go. I was waiting for. I remember waiting for this Christmas episode, and I said, if she's not 3 months pregnant at the end of this, I'm going to throw something at the television set.
Well, I just remember hearing all the speculation because a lot of people were trying to fit Orson Pink into the timeline now that Danny, ate it in this episode.
Maybe it was all just a coincidence.
Well, this is sort of a theme with this set of episodes, is that Moffat will set up an idea and then just be bored with it and just go off on a different tangent because he wants to have the big finish.
The big finish, so to speak. I really hope that's a sly reference.
Tongue-in-cheekly, I say yes.
Well, that's definitely something I want to talk about at the end, because I do agree with you on that aspect. A lot of the season feels like Moffat introducing things he thinks are cool and then not having any payoff to it.
Well, here's also, I think, the thing about that is that in the Doctor Who magazine interview, Steven Moffat was like, we really didn't want to do a two-parter unless there was a story that called for it, and this story called for it.
I read that quote, and I immediately was super skeptical because nearly the entire next season is two-parters, and I was like, really, Moffat?
I actually welcome the two-parters because I don't necessarily think that you can tell an effective story in 45 minutes.
No, I like the two-parters as well. Moffat even mentioned specifically, he's like, Peter Capaldi brings such gravitas to the role that you just want to see him go on and on and on, which is why one-part episodes are especially difficult for the 12th Doctor, I guess.
Right, because I mean, my main thing with Capaldi is like I think as a brilliant actor, I think he could have been the best Doctor since Tom Baker, but he just got in season 8. It was basically the Clara show, and he was just this wacky neighbor of a Time Lord buddy of Clara's. And I mean, looking back, this is actually going to be the second time I've reviewed this. I reviewed this pair of episodes on Who 37 shortly after the episode came out. So I've had a few years for it to marinate, and I actually watched this again last week. I actually picked up. I was in LA a few months ago, and I was at the big record store near like Hollywood and Sunset. And they had the entire Peter Capaldi run on a 9 DVD set for less than $50. And I thought, I can't pass that up. I have to buy it. And I was intending to watch along, with you guys, because you're in the midst of it now. Mm-hmm. And I got as far as. I'd say I fell asleep during Into the Dalek. And
a good start.
Understandable.
And I got through about a Sherwood, and the next episode was Time Heist. It's like I just can't do. No. And then the caretaker was coming up. It's like no. I mean, we'll talk about all this at the end. But then I skipped ahead to a couple of episodes into next season, and then last week I finally sat down and watched Darkwater and Death in Heaven. Once again, and I'm proud to say that I only yelled at the television set once this time.
This time.
No, but I mean, I definitely agree. I think this is, as Peter Capaldi's first season, it's a really weak batch of episodes and doesn't showcase him enough. And I mean, this reminds me really of season 7 from the classic show with Pertwee. I mean,
interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I
think it's all uphill from here. Honestly, in my opinion, I think it only gets better and better. I know a lot of people disagree, but I think Series 10, Series 9 are some of the best episodes we've ever gotten in the reboot for sure.
Series 9 is, I guess, the opposite of a shit sandwich because the good stuff's in the middle and the shit is on either side.
Yeah, the one episode I cannot remember for the life of me from the next season is the finale. Like, I cannot remember what it was about. Like,
that's probably for the best. That's probably for the best.
It's completely gone from my memory.
Maybe it has one of those memory erasing effects at the end.
This is going to be the part where they say, "Show us in the doll. Show us the where Moffat touched you."
Oh shoot! It was hell bent. Oh, yes. I remember now.
Yes. Show us in the doll where Moffat touched you.
Well, preempting all of that, we got to get through all of this nonsense first. Yes. And it begins...
remind me how this begins.
It begins with Clara calling Danny and doing the 12th Doctor thing, which is like, shut up, shut up, shut up, stay shut up. And Danny's like, so this is how we talk to each other now, huh? And Clara's like, yeah, this is how we talk to each other now.
Yeah, my first note is actually Danny Pink is an idiot because
I think that's my second note. Actually, literally says, "Danny, you idiot."
He is the most unobservant person I've ever seen on the show. He couldn't. The last episode, which I haven't heard you because that's coming out tomorrow as we record this, he couldn't keep track of all the school kids that was under his care.
Oh yeah, we definitely rib him for that.
And then we'll see later on that was he stationed in Afghanistan or Iraq? I can never remember.
Do they
I want to say Iraq.
Or?
I don't know if they explicitly say. It's somewhere in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a flashback to where Danny is in combat, and we find out what's up with Danny because he basically goes in and he's trying to secure a house, and he goes in and he shoots first before even going in and checking to see if there's anyone who's not a soldier in there. And we find out that he didn't accidentally. He killed a young kid. So he doesn't watch where he's going. And I guess karma's a bitch. So, because it comes back around and he doesn't pay attention and he gets killed by an automobile.
Well, that's the thing about Danny this whole season, and why I just like completely dislike the entire conception of his character, because he's really just like Moffat's plot device this entire season. He just does what Moffat needs him to do that week. It's difficult to say like, oh, well, Danny as a person does blank, blank, blank. Like his morals are blank, 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 because all he does is just whatever moves the plot forward.
Well, here's the thing about that. I think, the final thing with Danny, just preempting a little bit, with him bringing back the kid or whatever, like, I think there's that payoff there. But, like, the setup for it is, like, and that's good. I really liked that bit at the end. But the setup for that payoff, I guess, is, like, so inadequate that it's just, I don't know, it rubs you the wrong way.
Well, he lumbers Clara with this kid, and it's like, well, what's she going to do with this kid now? Because he's been dead for a few years, and his family's probably dead. So
his family's probably like either they're dead or they've mourned their kid's death for 2-3 years or however long ago it was that Danny was serving, and it's like
they can always just TARDIS him back to whenever,
And how's she going to explain how the kid hasn't aged, and like, because it's been at least a year or two after? And who's bright idea to have Danny Pink, work as a school teacher? He has obvious PTSD issues, and he has issues with killing kids. So, hey, what's the best place to place him? Let's have him teach a bunch of kids.
Yeah, that is the other thing that. Well, I guess I was going to bring up later, but it seems optimal to bring up now that, like, you would think that being around kids would have him relive this trauma of him killing a kid, but we see no indication of that throughout this entire season.
Well, except for the first scene with him when they ask him, "Have you killed a non-soldier?" And then he just has the single solitary tear before the bell rings.
Yeah, this episode also is interesting because, at the beginning of the season, I guess I was kind of talking about how, trauma is, I guess now, thought to be like an experience kind of out of time, right? An experience that you only understand later on, not in the moment. But then this episode comes along and makes it seem like that's not really the case. It seems he realizes what he did in the moment and is totally there in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Which also just kind of rubs me the wrong way.
Well, we actually see Clara go through some trauma.
Clara goes through trauma differently than Danny here.
Yeah, she won't mourn. She starts to have a serious superiority complex because she says, things like, "It was just ordinary. It was just boring," and she's just kind of, she's in shock, but she's just trying to pass it off as like, "Well, this is nothing. This was just a complete waste," and
well, this is completely kind of bizarre parallel with that statement actually between Clara and Missy, because later on when the doctor's just falling out of the airplane, Missy's like, "That's so boring. The doctor's just going to die by going splat out of an airplane. Like, that's such a boring way for the doctor to die."
Okay, I didn't pick that up.
And Clara's here in the beginning being like, "Oh, Danny was just so ordinary." It's interesting to think about. The kind of parallels there.
Yeah, so this is actually for me the turn in her character, which is going to develop into next season. She gets, like I said, a really bad superiority complex where she feels like she's invulnerable, and that's going to, spoilers, get her at the end, or not.
It's going to come get her.
Yes. Interesting. Did you recognize the woman who played her grandmother?
I did not.
Yeah, it was the woman from, I forget what the story was, the one where there's the creatures inside the townspeople, and it's the one with Amy and Rory. Is her,
no.
Right? No?
No, it's not.
No?
She was on a Colin Baker episode.
Oh
boy, well, I think I was knocked out for most of that era.
She was on Vengeance on Varos. Do you remember the couple who were bickering at each other and watching the television?
Yes.
Oh my God, yes.
That's her.
Well, she redeemed herself.
You can check out anytime you want, but you can never leave.
Jeez,
once you're a part of Doctor Who, You can get roped back in at any time. You're not safe.
It's true. And if the show doesn't get you, then Big Finish will snap you right out.
That's like, I was reading some like interviews from maybe like 4 or 5 years ago about like when Star Wars was coming back with Disney and stuff. And it was like Mark Hamill being asked, and Carrie Fisher as well being asked, like, so why did you decide to like come back for the new Star Wars? And they're really like I couldn't have, I would have been publicly crucified. Like I couldn't have said no. I didn't really want to, but I had to.
Harrison Ford had the right idea. He came back, but he's like, I'm going to come back if you find a way for me to not come back anymore.
Yeah, he actually said that about Empire Strikes Back. He was originally wanting to get himself.
I think he's wanted to get out since the beginning.
Star Wars came out.
Yeah, well, so Clara eventually calls up the doctor and is like, hey, let's go to a volcano. The doctor's like, but why? And she's like, I just want to go to a volcano. No ulterior motives here.
So they go meet Caecilius and Pompey. No.
that might have been better than what we actually got.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that we go from the credits, we go straight to Mustafar. And Doctor's like, Claire, I've got the high ground.
Don't do it, Claire. Don't do it.
I hate you.
She kind of does say that.
Yeah, she does.
She's chucking TARDIS keys into the lava to get the Doctor to go back and save Danny. He's like, well, I can't. I can't. And Clara's like,
you can't rewrite history, not one line. Except when you can.
And they will.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
But the thing is that it's all done in a series of flashbacks and flash forwards. I mean, Moffat cannot tell a story straightforward. We has to keep switching from 5 minutes ago to now, back to 5 minutes ago. I don't know. I mean, especially with Rachel Talalay, I've noticed, because she comes back and does all the big Steven Moffat finales for the next two series. And I think she might have. I think she might have also directed the premiere 2-part episode for series 9. But they're always playing with time. They're always playing with flashbacks, and it's. I don't know if it necessarily works. I think it would have just been fine if they would have just straightforward. Clara comes into TARDIS. She picks up the key. She tries to put the Doctor to sleep, and then we're on Mustafar.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, I think I agree. It does feel. I mean, because the story's so linear, it does. Kind of feels like, all right, linear story. Let's throw in some weird time shenanigans anyway, and this is how we have to do it. Right? Type thing. I mean,
yes.
Well, I think that's why it feels so disjointed, is because the rest of the story is just so straightforward, but at the beginning you've got all this like nonsense. It's like flashback, flash forward, flash sideways. And then
yeah, I mean, just personally, I didn't like mind one way or the other really, but yeah, I mean, it does come off as this thing of like, all right, this isn't like Blink level of like time stuff, so here we go. Here's this instead.
I just thought, what's the point? I mean, other than just to have that strong image as we come back to credits. I mean, we would actually. I mean, we didn't really need those flashbacks at all. We could have just had. I don't know. I think they could have just written it, and I mean that's one of the main issues I have with Moffat is that he's writing as if to show the audience, oh, look how clever I am, but then he ends up tripping himself up again and again.
Well, since you mentioned that it's pretty much predominantly contained to Rachel Talalay stories, I wonder how much of an influence just her directorial style has on that, and how much of it may not necessarily be Moffat writing it into the story.
No, we've mentioned this multiple times before. It's come up like at least twice before, where it's like, these flashback, flash forward type things.
I guess, but twice out of, I mean, how many episodes has Moffat written up to this point?
A bunch, but 2 is still like, and then this is like the 3rd one, I think. It's still there.
It's 3 out of like, what, 30? It's like 10%?
Yeah, so it's still something he deals with in the episodes he writes. Just not as frequently as some of the other things he deals with. Anyway, it turns out this is... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
And then later, I was just going to say later on, in the second part of the story, he relies on flashbacks from other episodes as if to say, hey, it's been so long since, you may not remember, hey, this is how I set this all up. The woman in the shop. We don't need to see Matt Smith answering the TARDIS phone. We get it. We're way ahead of you, Moffat.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. When those flashbacks started, showing up, I was just like, oh, come on, like, we're not dumb, type thing. But yeah, it turns out this is all like VR or something, or a dream, fever dream.
Well, it kind of is because, Clara is not really standing on Mustafar. I keep calling it Mustafar. I know it's not Mustafar, but...
we know what you mean,
Krakatoa.
No. Krakatoa.
Yeah, so the Doctor actually, this is another one of those flashback moments. The Doctor actually set this all up using, I forget what the device was called.
Clara thought it was like a sleep patch for helping you sleep, and she tries to put it on the Doctor to knock him out, but he takes it off himself and puts it on her, and he's like, yeah, it's not actually a sleep patch, it just like introduces a dream state.
Yeah, induces a dream state.
And that's kind of weird in the context of what next week's story is about, but anyway... introduces a dream state, and so this was all just a dream. I wanted to see what you were going to do. She's like, well, I betrayed you. And he's like, yeah, you did. You betrayed literally everything I stand for.
But the Doctor's still on her side.
He's so infinitely patient with Clara. He wouldn't have been this patient. He wasn't that patient with Adam.
Yeah, well, I guess the thing about Adam was he was trying to do it for profit. Maybe the Doctor just hates capitalism. Maybe the Doctor is a communist.
The 12th Doctor, I think especially, is more impatient than other Doctors. We see that with almost every character except Clara. Especially Danny. Yeah. He's very, quick to take it.
He comes around in this episode on Danny. Yeah. Whether justifiably or not.
I came around with Danny too. I liked the ending.
He still calls him PE, to the end. He's still calling him PE.
Right.
Yeah, but he kind of turns it into an affectionate nickname almost by the end of the story.
Yeah, it's like when someone's bullying you and they give you a nickname, but then eventually you're all friends.
Power. But yeah, the Doctor's like, well, he tells Clara to go to hell, and she's like, yep, fair enough. And he's like, no, we're literally going to hell. I'm like, wow, so that's where you think Danny went to hell?
Danny went to hell.
And he goes, or wherever you guys go to after you die. And this is like, okay, when has the Doctor ever become that metaphysical? When has he ever, decided, hey, let's find out what happens when you die?
I don't know, probably sometime after he literally met
Satan.
Like Satan. Yeah. In the Impossible Planet. Or when he literally met a god in Rings of Arcatan.
Oh, you mean the pumpkin planet?
The Great Pumpkin.
The god that he killed and probably wiped out their religion and source of energy.
Yeah. They're definitely
it wasn't the Doctor. That was the leaf. That was Clara's leaf that did all that. That was, again, the Doctor taking a back seat to Clara. Because Clara was the one who saved the day. Or actually doomed everyone because the sun went nova and,
Yeah, the Doctor was just going to self-sacrifice at that point, and Clara was like, but I have this leaf. The Doctor was like, yeah, I guess we could use that leaf.
Have this leaf.
And then the Doctor BS's his way through the leaf being a story about anything that could have happened.
Great episode. Yeah. Fantastic episode. My favorite. Yeah, my favorite New Who episode.
Still strongly disagree with that sentiment.
I like how Keon is very contrarian with his choices of.
Yeah, I'm just a natural.
It was that time he really liked Armageddon Factor, and everyone was like, "Wait, what?"
That's not actually a bad story. I think it's a little bit too campy, especially with Shop. Falling backwards and into the turbo lift and screaming.
It also gave us Drax. Drax is his name,
Drax
right?
was awesome.
Yeah.
It also gave us Drax.
And Sigma.
And Taurus. And
Theta Sigma. That's where that name comes from. Where Bob Baker and Dave Martin tried to name the Doctor and totally failed.
It wasn't as bad as Invasion of Time. That I will not excuse Invasion of Time. But Armageddon Factor probably was maybe a couple episodes too long.
I think that was my chief complaint about that episode, was that it should have been 4 episodes and not 6.
But then how would you fit in that awesome time loop? Fire.
You just
fire.
You just wouldn't. You know in your heart of hearts that was just a way to waste 5 minutes.
Yeah, but it was a great way to waste 5 minutes.
It was an imaginative way of like padding a story.
What's a genius way to pad the story? Just play the same scene again.
Hey man, they were working on a budget. You can't pay these actors. You can't pay them for their work.
I'm waiting for someone to splice that scene with the scene from Beavis and Butthead where they're both going, fire, 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 fire.
Don't let your dreams be dreams. Be the change you want to see in the world.
Wow, one of the people who said one of those quotes is a much more well-known and greater person than the other.
I'm really glad you think Shia LaBeouf is the one true Messiah. So anyway,
oh god, now I'm imagining like Gandhi, like skinny as hell, like flexing, like, oh yeah, don't let your dreams be dreams. Hasn't eaten in like 10 days. God.
Anyway, in terms of the afterlife, the Doctor's made it to the alleged afterlife, or at least he plugs Clara into the
Matrix.
Telepathic circuits.
Yeah.
The telepathic circuits.
Yeah.
And this is where the first kind of disjunction happens between the rest of the season and this episode, because the Doctor seems to be completely aware that they traveled all up and down Danny's timeline in Listen and not Clara's, even though for like a substantial portion of the season he thought he was just traveling up and down Clara's timeline, especially in that episode and the next episode when he meets Danny Pink and like is completely oblivious to the fact that he looks identical to Orson. But in this episode, magically, the Doctor's like, yeah, we were traveling up and down Danny's timeline. Yep, totally knew that all along.
I mean, like, I don't know. Who cares? Like, it's not that big of a deal.
Maybe not alone, but combined with everything else.
This might also explain why this is another example of how Moffat will set up something that could have been really interesting, but then just completely lost interest, is because the reason Danny became a soldier is because the Doctor planted that idea into his head. Mm-hmm. And the Doctor never realized that Danny did become a soldier and did kill that kid in Afghanistan and has all these issues. And he was never confronted with that fact. And I think that could have been a really interesting piece of drama there. But no, Moffat just wasn't interested in doing that.
Yeah, there's definitely no like payoff for that. I don't know, maybe.
There's still no payoff to him being actually a PE teacher either, but in some way.
It might be better that way. I don't know. I
don't think it is.
Both because, like, you think, all right, what if they do, if they go ahead and do this, they're going to, like, somehow screw it up like they did the rest of the season. But also, like, I don't know, there might be something to, like, even in the end of this, the Doctor doesn't really know what was going on type thing.
But, I mean, we had this whole thing about how the Doctor hates soldiers. And then, I mean, we could have Danny's like, you know, he could have realized that, you know, he could have remembered, hey, I remember you and Clara in my bedroom when I was back in an orphanage, and you made me this way. You know, we could have done it that way.
I mean, even just mentioning it in any way would have, I think, been better than what we got, just to bring it to the forefront. Just to like pose the question, you know, they don't necessarily have to answer or give the Doctor's reaction, but just to pose the question to the audience, like, hey, you realize that the Doctor was the one who made Danny this way, right? Kind of thing.
Well, maybe like now that I think about it, maybe that's what has to do with trauma in these episodes of like, you're not going to go and traumatize the Doctor, making him have this like realization much later that what he thought he was doing, you know, that he didn't like fully realize what he was doing at the time, right? Kind of like how they did when Clara went to Gallifrey and they didn't tell him.
Well, this whole episode,
I actually like that a lot.
This whole episode is like people just doing things for the Doctor to quote save his soul, unquote. You know, at the end when Missy's like, "Who's gonna save your soul?" And of course, it's the bloody spoilers brigadier.
Well, I really like that idea then of like, all right, they're not going to tell the Doctor because that's going to like save him or whatever. It's going to prevent his trauma, or it's going to save his soul, you know, type thing.
Well, the whole thing with Missy doing all this for the doctor, she does this because she wants her friend back. She deep down wants the doctor to tell her it's okay. Hey, it's okay. You killed all those people. It's okay. You massacred all those. That's perfect. I understand. She's trying to bring the doctor down to her level, and it was very much reminding me a lot of the sort of dichotomy between the Batman and Joker. In The Killing Joke, the Joker is trying to traumatize Batman into having one bad day where he'll finally snap and he'll become like the Joker. And it's the same thing with Missy and the doctor.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting comparison, because I was actually thinking of it in context of that. I think this episode, the story standalone in this season alone, is pretty dull and not great. But at least for me, when I consider it as a dichotomy to a lot of the overarching plot of series 10 in regards to Missy and the Doctor, spoiler, she's not really dead.
Yeah, no, I didn't even put her on the death count. It was
in that, a lot of this episode and what Missy was trying to do this season is saying, hey, Doctor, you're like me.
A lot of Doctor Who villains do that.
But not to spoil too much about Series 10, there's this, I think, really interesting kind of inversion where the Doctor's like, well, I'm not like you, Missy, but you're actually like me, the other way around. And I want to talk about that more, obviously, when we get to those episodes.
Yeah, you're just trying to make a linear story more timey-wimey. I can't believe I actually said that. Just bleep it out. Just kidding.
Well, anyway, so they land at this 3W complex, this mausoleum.
Yeah, as soon as I saw this thing, I was like, oh, so they're in the Matrix. And little did I know
they're not in the Matrix.
How right I was.
Well, the Doctor and Clara aren't in the Matrix,
Danny,
but good boy Danny's in the Matrix. Dan the Soldier Man.
And then I remembered Doctor Who actually invented the Matrix.
Yeah.
And the Wachowskis just appropriated it.
I don't think that's necessarily what happened.
I mean, it pretty much is. Doctor Who literally invented the Matrix, and they call it the Matrix.
Yeah, but we don't know if they even were aware of Doctor Who's conception.
Oh, they were.
Have they said that?
They've in interviews. They're like, yeah, we've watched Doctor Who. They had this virtual world, and we really like that idea. There's an interview where they say pretty much exactly that.
You're gonna have to link that in the show notes.
If I can find it again. Oh, I can just look in the Matrix episode show notes of Triple Play, our movie trilogy podcast that's on hiatus right now, but you should still check out because it desperately needs the listeners.
Well, the Doctor and Clara meet Missy, who claims she's an android, and right from the get-go, you're like, I don't buy it.
She had me fooled for 3 seconds.
Yeah. Did you notice what she described herself as?
In which context? In her acronym, or she's a...
Right.
Oh,
She calls herself a random access neuro interface. And that was written to throw off people who might have, gotten a sneak peek at the script, although they kept the last bit of part 1 out. But that was to throw everyone off because that's an acronym for Ronnie.
Oh, wow. That is a multi-layered thing.
I kind of did half expect her to be the Ronnie through the whole season going into this.
I was expecting the monk, actually. No.
That's wild. That's a left field guess.
Let it go, Keon. Let it go.
Hey, Big Finish has brought back the monk in a substantial capacity.
But the thing is, they're making money off of the monk, and I'm not.
You could be if we monetize this podcast.
I wonder how much trouble I'd get in if I wrote and sold Doctor Who books unlicensed.
Just do what the
Bill Baggs did that back in the 90s.
Yeah, I was going to say, just do what they did in the 90s and just call the characters all something super similar but
they
different.
Did that with Blake 7 too.
Really vaguely, really thinly veiled cover stories. Just change the doctor's police box to like porta potty or something.
So anyway, Danny is dead. Is dead. And he's sort of working with and talking to this person from 3W, the company that deals with you after you die.
Mm-hmm.
Seb, in a brilliant quote unquote bit of stunt casting there, he's being played by Chris Addison, who was Capaldi's co-star in The Thick of It.
Ah. Fun fact.
Yeah, no.
I think the character's name is Seb.
Yes,
he gets written out in the most unceremonious way possible. But he's there to introduce Danny to the afterlife. He asks if Danny's going to be cremated, and he's like, no. I don't think so. I don't know. The guy's like, I'm just going to put down a yes.
Yeah, so it's kind of hinting at what the main, I guess like thrust of the problem of the afterlife is here. It's cremation, surprisingly enough.
I wonder if the producers of The Good Place were watching and it's like, hey, this is a good idea.
Hey, no spoilers, I haven't watched it. I intend to watch it, so no spoilers.
That's all I'm going to say, yes.
I intend not to watch it, so...
Oh, come on. It's a good show. I actually dismissed it because I watched the first episode. It's like, yeah, this is kind of, NBC network television drivel. But I gave it a chance, and hey, it was actually quite entertaining and quite off the wall.
That's good to know. I don't like admitting that like new modern television is good. It's when I watched Good Omens, I was like, yeah, I really don't want to admit that I like this.
You have no problem admitting that you like Doctor Who.
Yeah, well, Doctor Who is
modern television now.
It's different.
It's modern television.
It's 50 years old. It has a long history behind it.
It's still modern television.
Yeah, but like it's different. It's in its own. It's not even in its own category. It's just its own thing.
Isn't that by definition in its own category?
I guess I don't know. It's its own thing. Whatever.
Well, so Clara starts communicating with Danny. This guy's described, Dr. Chang's described this whole thing about dark water and how it only allows you to see organic matter. But
which was completely stupid. I'm sorry. This was just, what was the whole point? The only reason why we had dark water is just so we can have the reveal that, oh my God, it's the Cybermen, which we already knew because they just couldn't keep their mouths shut.
The preview. Yeah, Doctor Who magazine.
I mean, it's a cool idea. I mean, maybe not big enough in the episode to name the episode Dark Water.
Well, a couple things here. He describes it as working by having a unique refractive index, and that's not how refractive indices work at all, Steven Moffat. So you need to go hit the books there.
Well, I mean, whatever. Like,
the moon's an egg, so who cares?
Yeah, but they didn't try to ground that in real science. They were just like, the moon's an egg, and that's the Doctor Who thing, is that it's just this fantastical thing that is whatever, the moon's an egg. This was like they tried to explain it with real science, and it was like, that's not how that works.
But who knows if they were actually trying to do that? We don't know what anyone was trying to do.
I guess.
They just gave an explanation. Whether it fits or not.
Secondary thing, when Dr. Chang puts his arm in the water, you can still see like his skin and everything, but like when Danny opens up his Cyberman, there's like clearly a body in there, but you only see the skeletons in the water. So that's
so I guess Dr. Chang was just lying through his teeth.
Or some of the Cybermen only have skeletons inside, which is
you don't see the
weird.
Organs. There's no brain, and then they're not really Cybermen at this point. They're just kind of robots with skeletons inside them.
There's one human component. No.
Yeah, this is Moffat gets the Cybermen wrong again.
Oh dear God! It's the whole plot about, okay, we're going to download your soul or whatever. We're going to take out your emotion, and then we're going to put you back in your body. And make you Cyberman. It's like, what's the point? Why not? Why don't you just skip the middleman and just convert the corpses? What's all this about taking the soul?
I mean, I kind of get it. Because the Cybermen's whole thing was, at least in the reboot, this wasn't the thing they had in the classic series, was that the Cybermen like suppress all their emotions. They became very Dalek-esque,
right? But
like
but
that.
they
We can
have,
blame Russell T for that.
But they have hardware on their chest that does that. So why are they having this option to delete your soul while you're in the good place? By tapping the iPad.
Well, there's
saying,
this
delete
like
my soul.
half-baked idea, I think, that is when I watched this the first time, and I watched the first episode and I was waiting for the second episode. This is where I thought they were really going to go with this, is that like these Cybermen are more subservient. They're more easily controlled.
They're less subservient, less easily controlled, actually.
Because the people chose to have their emotions removed rather than having it being forced upon them during the cyberization process. And that's why Missy was uploading them and then giving them the choice of removing these emotions that all these people are feeling when they're dead. But
why?
But they just never go anywhere with it.
I mean, why? What's the point? I mean, is she trying to prove a point?
She's trying to make an army that continually grows in size no matter how many people you attack, I guess.
I mean, the whole thing, if you think about it, if she's trying to prove a point about how emotions held us back, then, why is she being so emotional with the doctor at the end? It's like, please, I just want my friend back. She's kind of contradicting herself.
Well, again, it's this half-baked idea, I think. The
Master's plans have always been really half-baked, but this is barely baked.
I mean, I just don't get it, I guess. I mean, I guess seeing the Cybermen is cool. It's like, yeah, the Cybermen, they're always my favorite villain,
right,
until they got overused and totally butchered.
Yeah, I haven't liked the Cybermen since the classic series, really.
Yeah. Well, the Age of Steel Rise of the Cybermen was pretty good.
They had their moments.
But once they started bringing those Cybermen into the regular universe, and let's not even mention Nightmare in Silver.
No.
I do think Moffat does eventually get the Cybermen right. Two bloody seasons from now. But until then, we got to make do with these Cybermen. Although I do like the design. I will give them props for... I'll give the costume department props.
How they didn't get sued by Marvel, I have no idea.
Yeah, they do go full Iron Man.
Yeah, there's some Iron Cybermen here.
Iron Legion, Age of Ultron nonsense. Well, the Doctor and Missy eventually meet up again. The thing is, the Doctor has felt her chest and realized that she's got two hearts. Yeah, I worded it that way.
Well, he doesn't realize that until the end, because did he actually feel it and then just like...
I think he did, because he just stands there with his hand up, kind of looking confused, like he doesn't really believe it's possible. Although he doesn't say anything.
He doesn't say anything, but he definitely knows. I think
there's definitely some like non-verbal acting from Capaldi going on here, where the Doctor, like, he clearly knows she's got two hearts, but he's trying to figure out how that's possible because Gallifrey is supposed to be gone.
Right. And what happened to being able to recognize the Master on sight?
That was the one thing that when I watched this the first time, I was like, "What the bloody hell?" But they kind of discarded that in the reboot anyway with Harold Saxon, and the Doctor didn't really.
Oh, but
pick
they
up on
said
him
that
either.
No, when they escape from Utopia, it's like, how are you going to know it's him? I'll know it's him by sight. I'll just know.
Yeah, but that's the thing is that he didn't.
It was just a weird
he didn't
flex
recognize
type thing.
He didn't recognize the Master at Utopia. The Derek Jacobi Master.
But he wasn't the Master at that time. It was only when he opened the watch and he got the Master's essence back into him. And it's like, oh.
But even
I'm sorry, I don't know if I can swear in this podcast, but
But even still, the Doctor didn't recognize that he was the Master when he got all this stuff back. The Doctor just thought that he had like snapped and was going rogue, and then he actually didn't get it till he goes, "I'm the Master, and it's nice to have a new body. I'm taking your TARDIS now." And the Doctor's like, "Oh wait, what?"
No, I think he knew. Just the moment that watch opened, he felt his presence. And, and then Martha started talking about...
I have to go back and rewatch it.
I mean, Martha started talking about the watch and everything, and it's just like, well, if they're all dead, and it's like, well, he's got a watch. Well, which one is it? And I think he knows. He just doesn't want to... He just doesn't want it to be the Master. But it's as soon as, like I said, as soon as that the watch is opened, it's out there, and he knows He just, I mean, and he finally gets into the room before Derek Jacobi's master goes into his TARDIS and just sort of have a look, and they just know. And then in the following episode, it's like, well, how are we going to find the master? He's changed. He's like, well, I'll know who. I'll just know by sight.
Except he totally didn't when he landed on Earth.
I mean, that was because Martha was able to recognize the voice of Harold Saxon. And it's like, oh my God, I voted for him.
I mean, I know a lot of fans of Doctor Who probably think otherwise, but I don't know. I don't get too like caught up or concerned about continuity in Doctor Who. It doesn't bother me at all.
The other thing I was going to say, that even in the classic era, the Doctor like completely didn't recognize the Master a couple times. Like, remember Traken? Master's plunking around Traken in the Doctor's life.
That's true.
Who's this?
That's true. And there was also Khalid and Time Flight. And
oh, yeah, Khalid. Khalid, I forgot about that.
Well, some people say Khalid was a pointless character, but I seem to remember two very sharp, pointed pieces of his mustache.
Damn it. God damn it.
It's a joke to pull out of your pocket whenever someone mentions Khalid, as I do.
You've literally never brought that joke up before in your life.
No, I've said it like twice. You just forgot. That's why it works every time.
Yeah, because it's such a forgettably bad joke. Well, so the Doctor and Missy go outside, and we get Steven Moffat trying to recreate the invasion here with the Cybermen clunking down St. Paul's Cathedral. I almost made the same mistake that I made in the invasion episode. Clunking down the steps, and it's just, wow, Moffat, see you like to do things other people have done better.
No, but I liked this, of like, when they're like, Missy says something along the lines of, do you even know where you are right now? And they come out the doors, and they're in London. And I was like, whoa.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine, but like him redoing this basically shot for shot of the Cybermen walking on the steps of
it's great.
St. Paul's Cathedral.
I didn't mind it. I didn't mind it at all. I thought it was a nice homage.
I did as well.
Fair enough. It's just the one. It's just another long string of Moffat doing other people's things. Yeah, I mean, he's going to do Genesis of the Daleks in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think but I do think that Moffat basically wrote the end of the episode just to have that homage.
Right, because I don't think there's any particular reason why it has to be St. Paul's Cathedral and not like the House of Parliament. It could even be. I mean, it could have been anywhere.
Or the Tower.
It almost would have been more iconic if they just stomped out of the Houses of Parliament. But although those did get destroyed in World War III, Aliens of London. So,
well, they would rebuilt it by then. Actually, we were at London last year, and they were my one big disappointment about the whole trip was that Big Ben is covered in scaffolding, and only one of the clock faces is visible, and it wasn't chiming, and it wasn't as tall as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah,
but they're actually doing some substantial. They're actually doing some renovations as we speak at the House of Parliament and Big Ben.
Right.
Cool.
I remember when Notre Dame burned down while it was under renovations. A lot of people I guess Big Ben's next, currently under renovations. Famous landmark.
So this is kind of where the episode ends. Missy reveals that she is indeed the Master. Now, as someone who didn't watch this as it aired, was there a lot of speculation that she was the Master?
I knew from deep breath that was the Master.
Wow, you knew from the beginning.
Because she just acted like so much like John Sim crazy whenever she was like biting her teeth and dancing around the fountain at the end of that episode. It's like, oh, that's the Master.
Well, the original conception of the character was supposed to be like Mary Poppins, but evil. Which is why she comes flying in on that umbrella at the end of episode 2. That's like a pretty direct homage to Mary Poppins there. But if I remember correctly, when it aired, there was a lot of speculation over the course of the whole season because I think Moffat would continuously refuse to acknowledge whether or not it was a returning character or not. So a lot of people thought it could be the Master. A lot of people thought it could be the Rani. A lot of people just had no clue.
A lot of people thought it was Romana because she referred to herself as mistress.
Also, yeah, that was a possibility that a lot of people threw around. I remember when the reveal came out, a lot of people, it severely split fandom, at least at the time, because a lot of people, like, there were the people who just didn't care. There were the people like, well, how does she escape Gallifrey? And there were people like, you shouldn't be allowed to change genders as a Time Lord.
Yeah, this is definitely, this one thing that I think this entire season is getting at is like sort of this test run for a female Doctor. With this, all this stuff with Missy and then Clara as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Moffat said, like, at the end of his run, he was like, yeah, Missy was, like, directly a test to see if audiences would accept a female Doctor.
And I think in that sense, he succeeded because up until that time, I wasn't convinced that was a good idea. But I thought Michelle Gomez did a fantastic job. As I saw bits of Delgado, I've seen bits of Ainley and bits of Sim in her performance. I thought she did very well. And that sort of helped me turn my thoughts around and said, maybe this is a good idea. Sort of incidentally, I was involved in a couple of local Doctor Who theater productions in Chicago. And we did a play about it was basically sort of a play within a play where it's these actors who are doing a play on sort of a musical review of Doctor Who, and then the real Doctor shows up and ruins everything. And then the sequel was going to have two Doctors in it, and one of the Doctors was played by a female. We had a woman playing one of the other Doctors, and she played it sort of as a fierce Scotswoman with a sword, and I thought, yeah, I think you can. And the thing was, I remember they were having issues with the script writers because they kept writing all these things, all these lines, and the actress was like, no, I'm not going to say that. You need to write my character just like you're writing the other character who's playing the Doctor. You need to write me as a Doctor, not as a woman. And it was only after that that I thought, well, yeah, if you could make it work, if you write her as the Doctor and not as a female Doctor, then that would work. So I was turned around. I was starting to turn around when Missy revealed herself as the Master, and then seeing her in Death in Heaven. That was my turnaround point.
I do think it's an incredibly clever way to kind of prep audiences. I just think it's a better transition to regenerate, the Master into a woman, which is almost a bigger deal in some ways because the Master is like the Doctor's biggest villain, and then later on regenerate the Doctor into the woman. I was always on the side of, well, just pick the best actor/actress for the role and just run with it. But
definitely,
I think Michelle Gomez is a brilliant Master. I just think looking at her whole run as a whole, I think she does a brilliant job.
But like Capaldi, I think she's sort of shortchanged by the scripts. They could have done much more with her.
I think so. But I think she plays off Capaldi really well.
I think it's the build-up to this episode that kind of falls flat. I think she could have had more before this.
Oh, I mean, I agree with that, definitely. Who wouldn't want more Michelle Gomez? I think she plays really well off Capaldi, especially in both these episodes. Like, her interactions with Capaldi are like classic Master Doctor interactions. It's like
Delgado and Pertwee.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine her with Matt Smith or David Tennant.
Oh, yeah, no. Absolutely not. Yeah, so the episode ends with her revealing she's the Master, and the next episode begins with Kate Stewart rolling Unit in and capturing her. There's this, I think, hilarious moment where the Cybermen come out and the Doctor's running down the street trying to get everyone to run away, and they just start taking selfies with the Cybermen. And I think this hilarious moment is immediately undercut by, like, about 2 scenes later, there's these news reports like, Cybermen are walking out of St. Paul's Cathedral. I'm like, wait a minute. So if you all knew it was Cybermen, why would you stop to take selfies with them, and why wouldn't you run away?
human nature.
Well, no, they were all unit soldiers because when they said now, all of those people who were taking selfies pulled out their guns.
It's the John Wick effect. Is everybody in New York an assassin?
Was it all of them? I feel like at least a few of them.
No, it was
were
all
just,
of them. It was all of them.
Okay.
They're probably just specifically watching St. Paul's Cathedral because it happened again before that.
How did they know they were there? How did they know this was all going on?
Oh, Kate mentions it. She mentions that they had been getting some weird energy readings from St. Paul's Cathedral, and they've been watching it for weeks at that point. She has She actually has this offhanded line because when the doctor gets on the plane, he's like, "How did you know we were there?" And she's like, "Oh, we've been watching St. Paul's Cathedral for weeks now, actually."
Yeah, it's like when you work in a store or whatever. You see someone shoplifting, you're not supposed to do anything. It's the same here. UNIT is they see all this going down, and they're just not supposed to do anything.
UNIT's game plan is typically not do anything and wait for the doctor to show up.
That's what they definitely did here.
And then don't listen to a thing he says.
Well, so they make him president of the world, which apparently every world leader has agreed to.
Apparently UNIT can, just call him king.
No, president.
Yeah.
It's like President Servalan.
Yeah.
And you're like, are you really a president? Clara, at this point, she's talking with Danny. And
hold on. We have to talk about the opening credits for Death in Heaven, because we have the scene where Jenna is found by the Cyberman. It's like Clara Oswald never existed.
That's after she talks with Danny. Because I was going to mention that.
She's going to. And that's another thing. She's talking with Danny. She's done. She basically tried to toss all the keys to the TARDIS just to get the doctor to take her to find Danny. And then once she's found Danny, she's like, "Oh, you're not Danny. I refuse to, because the doctor told her to be skeptical." And
for good reason, I think. I mean, there's definitely a possibility that it could not be Danny. I think skepticism is the right play here, although I think she maybe goes a little overboard with her skepticism.
Well, here's also the thing, just to, I guess, dial it back a little, is the very last thing you see in Dark Water is this shot of Danny looking into, because he's about to, delete his mind or whatever.
He hangs up the phone call because he's crying because Clara doesn't believe he's Danny.
Yeah, and you see, his reflection in the screen, but then you the screen kind of turns and you see the reflection of the kid, and I was like, oh, here we go. Next episode's gonna be awesome. Here comes the interrogation of Danny Pink. And it didn't happen. And I was waiting, and I was like, here it comes. It's coming. No, it didn't.
Yeah, Clara's cliffhanger for Dark Water, which I think is what JB was getting to, is that Clara goes, "The doctor's never existed. Clara's never existed. I'm actually the doctor. The doctor's just a cover. For me, I'm the real doctor." And they totally bait you really hard with that line in the preview for Dark Water back in, what was In the Forest of the Night? Where they just play the line where Clara's like, "Clara Oswald's never existed." And you're like, oh man, what's it going to be? And it's just Clara bluffing her way out of getting killed.
But then they go the extra step of putting Janet Coleman's name before Capaldi's on the credits, and then we have the flash of Clara's eyes instead of the doctor's eyes.
In the title sequence credits. They were really trying to sell you on it.
I think that was Moffat just being a troll.
That's good. I like that.
The only way it could be possible is if Capaldi's doctor regenerated into Clara, because we see Matt Smith regenerated into Capaldi at the beginning of the season. So
yeah.
But yeah, then we see this absolutely just bravo Moffat reference to the classic series, because the rain's falling and we see it go through the gutter to, you guessed it, the chaplet.
Oh, wow.
The chaplet funeral home. Bravo, Moffat, bravo.
So that's what she did.
That's what Dodo did when she left.
All the death she witnessed influenced her life decisions, I see.
Yeah, all that death she witnessed in the 3 stories she had and the 1 story she was MIA for, and then just sent a letter from the country home.
The Ark is a traumatic experience if I've ever seen one.
Those monoids were scary as hell. And when the monoids took over and the humans were the slaves, whew.
They were all stuck in that security kitchen.
Why do I remember the Ark so well? That was 5 years ago.
The best thing from the arc, I forget what it was. Dodo asks one of the monoids like something, and it totally gives away the answer. And it was like, wait, I mean, no, never mind.
Oh, the best part of the arc was how the solution to their problem was just to create a revolt that subserviates the monoids again, instead of accepting that they're sentient beings and they can work together.
Wait a minute, were the monoids the predecessors to the Ood in a way? Oh shoot.
Well, isn't there that indication that the Ood planet is near the sense sphere? So
yeah, the Ood are
Well, anyway, back on the topic of the president of the world, Doctor's president of the world on the plane. They get on a plane for some reason. I'm not entirely convinced this is a good idea.
He can only be president when he's on board and they're in the air. That's the only time that he can actually take office. I don't know why. That's just the reason.
Pretty sure it's only when he's on the plane, so he could have just lawyered them and be like, well, we don't have to take off, right? We could just sit on the tarmac for a couple hours.
But they drug him.
Well, he walks onto the plane, though. They wake him up before they get on the plane.
Oh, okay.
They reference their other aircraft. I forgot what it's called.
The Valiant.
Yeah.
The Doctor asks if they're going to Cloud Base, and Osgood's like, no, Cloud Base was Thunderbirds. And then Colonel Ahmed later's like, no, Cloud Base was actually Captain Scarlet. So, some classic British sci-fi references for you there.
Steven Moffat revealing his hand. You never name drop your inspirations. You do it the Chaucer way and totally mislead people.
Well, there's this thing here where they put the TARDIS on the plane, and the Doctor's like, oh, did you get Clara? And they're like, no, we couldn't get her out of St. Paul's. And he's like, oh, but you got the TARDIS, though. And they're like, yeah, we got the TARDIS out. I'm like, wait, what? How did they get the TARDIS out, but not Clara? Very confusing.
That's the least of my worries as far as plot holes.
It was the biggest worry for me. I was like, come on, guys. What's going on here?
Well, someone looks out the window and there's a Cyberman outside. Hanging onto the
window.
The window.
Well, don't forget this critical line where Kate mentions that, because there's a picture of the Brigadier on the plane. Which is kind of
really
weird.
Odd picture of him, actually.
You kind of have to wonder why there's this painting of the Brigadier on the plane. He wasn't the only Brigadier General in unit. Can we all remember Brigadier Bambera?
Oh my God. But it's Kate Stewart, so obviously she's going to have her dad framed up on the wall.
But she says something like, his one ambition in life was to get you to salute him, Doctor. And he's like, could have just asked.
I don't seem to remember that.
Yeah, that's definitely Moffat retconning his way into the classic show here.
Guess it was just all off screen.
I also have to point out the Moffat slamming the Americans when the Doctor says something about, oh, they're just going to bomb you and then they're going to pray afterwards. That was kind of, as an American, I was offended. Because not all Americans.
I totally missed that.
I remember him saying something about the President of America, but I don't remember exactly what it was.
Yeah, something about don't get them involved. They're just going to bomb, and then they're going to pray afterwards. Something to that effect.
Or they'll just bomb and ignore. Can we all remember when we deforested Vietnam, Agent Orange? So, yeah, the Cyberman is on the window, like Keon said. And Ahmed's like, what could one Cyberman do? And he's like, wait, there's more than one Cyberman. Never mind.
He eats those words seconds later when he dies.
Well, Missy kills her two guards and Osgood. Rip Osgood. Gone forever.
Yeah, Missy's dead at the end of this episode, right? I don't think the Master's ever going to come back.
The Doctor makes an under-the-breath offer to Osgood to travel with him all through all of time and space.
She's still... maybe he just wants the Fourth Doctor's scarf back that she's still wearing, I think.
No, she's
wearing the bow tie.
She's in the 11th Doctor's
she's
outfit
wearing the
now.
bow tie, yeah. That's what it was, because bow ties are cool. Forgot about that. Forgot for a second.
Yeah, how could
I forget? Bow ties are cool. So what happens next? I don't even.
Well, Missy opens the door and Kate Stewart goes flying out. You're like, Kate gone forever.
I thought she was actually dead. This is the one thing where it's like, oh shoot, they just killed her off.
Oh shoot, they just killed Kate.
No, this is where Missy reveals that it was her that hooked up the doctor and Clara in the first place, because she was the woman in the shop that Clara got the phone number for the tech support.
This, again, I was like, wait, so when Clara saw Missy as the android, she just, like, didn't recognize her as the woman in the shop, which is, I guess, fine, because who would remember, like, the random woman in the shop? But also, that's the woman you got the doctor's phone number from. So It seems like a pretty major event in your life.
So the whole point was for the master to pair up the doctor and Clara, because she's going to yank your chain and you're always going to be responding to her, and it kind of sets up season 9 in a way, because the doctor and Clara, just as much as Danny and Clara was a really toxic relationship, this doctor companion relationship is probably the most toxic I've ever seen since Colin Baker and Perry.
Oh, I mean, like, absolutely. It's like not in a contest, I think.
Season 7 was pretty
Oh, that's true. Amy Roy and the Doctor.
No. I was going to say Clara in Series 7 with the Doctor was, like, awesome. I really like Series 7. Clara is my favorite companion of the new show.
Much like it used to be just specifically Series 1 Rose.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Series 7, Clara was really just a MacGuffin. She wasn't really a character. She was just a mystery box for the Doctor to solve. And then once we solved it, and she's not really traveling with the Doctor in Series 8, because she keeps working and she keeps being picked up and dropped off and everything. But then, in a way to build her character up, let's give her a boyfriend. And let's have her, have a doctor life and a Danny life and a school life. And, the point is she couldn't hack trying to do all this at once.
Yeah, now that you bring that up, I think that touches on, or kind of preempts one of my, I think, major problems with this season, is that, like, that dynamic could be pretty interesting. They don't really, and I feel like if they established that in the first episode or second of this season, it would have, like, I don't know, felt a little better. Because, like, now at the end of the season, looking back, I can say, like, okay, yeah, it was this sort of dynamic where she has this, like you said, Doctor life and Danny life, but, like, I never, like, got that until now. And maybe I'm just dumb, but...
Well, I kind of feel like it would have worked better if Danny was introduced in Series 7 and we just, like... Maybe he was just introduced.
We just, like, knew him a little bit.
Yeah, we just knew of him, and we just met him.
Kind of like Mickey then, I guess.
And then in this season... Chloe was like, look, I've got this boyfriend and I want to spend more time with him. And then it leads into this duality, because I don't know if you can do that right from the beginning of the season without having Danny.
Yeah, and hey, while we're making these hypothetical changes, just take out all that stuff about Danny being a soldier.
Well, if we have that godlike ability over the show. Yeah, so but what you're saying is basically give Danny a character.
Yeah, essentially what I'm saying is just scrap Danny and do it all over again.
Do it better.
Anyway, where were we? What was happening?
The doctor falls out of the plane, and this is when Missy's like, oh, he's going to just go splat. That's so boring. But
yeah, you see the TARDIS.
And then Seb's like, oh man, he's going to land in the TARDIS. It's going to be great. Look at it go. He's like, permission to squee, and then he gets killed. Missy just really casually.
She kind of just like rolls her eyes and blasts him. Blast him.
So wait a second. How did Missy get into the Matrix?
Well, I think it's implied that the Matrix is. I actually think it's implied that the Matrix is inside her TARDIS. Because the doctor mentions that the inside of St. Paul's is bigger on the inside, and he said it's easy to do if you're a Time Lord and you have a TARDIS.
And they've done this sort of thing before where it's like the Doctor's TARDIS isn't the Master's TARDIS isn't the Doctor's TARDIS isn't the... Yeah, it goes on and on.
Well, that was one of the key points of speculation leading to Missy being the Master, is that...
What if all of this was just in her TARDIS?
No, is that the very first scene we see her in, she's in that garden, and a lot of people were like, that garden looks a lot like a console room. Because the fountain is in the middle, and it's circular, And the whole room is very circular.
From the girl who, or whatever that episode was called.
Girl Who Waited.
Yeah, Girl Who Waited.
Yeah. So how long has she been collecting souls? I mean, that was in Victorian times or Edwardian times, whenever Deep Breath was taking care. And then she had the one guy from Into the Dalek, or the two of them from Into the Dalek.
Well, Missy says she jumped all up and down the Doctor's time with humans. And then Kate asks the Doctor, how long has she been doing this? And the Doctor's like, how long have humans had a concept of an afterlife? So, basically forever. She has a TARDIS, so she can do that.
Taking a page out of the Zygons book and just kind of being there. Except with the ability to time travel.
But yeah, so the Doctor lands and they land in this graveyard, and basically the entire rest of the episode takes place in this graveyard.
Yeah, this is where I started liking the episode. I think everything from here till the end is good, if not great.
Danny saves Clara and takes her to this graveyard, and he's like, I need you to disable my enable my emotional inhibitor.
Yeah, because Danny's been cyberized at this point. We unmask a Cyberman and we see that it's Danny. Or
he's been holding
a very warped version of Danny.
And Clark calls the Doctor for help, and he comes down. And he's like, I'm not going to let you do this. And she's like, why not? He wants this. I want
this.
And he's
I
like,
want to do it now.
He's going to strangle you the moment he turns off his emotions.
Yeah.
But then he turns off his emotions, but he's still Danny. I guess he's traumatized so much that overrides any kind of cyber conversion.
Well, it's because love's not an emotion, so it can't get inhibited by the inhibitor. I think that's actually what Moffat was going for with the love isn't an emotion, it's a promise.
Yeah, I mean, that's like the payoff to turn off my emotions thing.
My one and only problem with this scene is when Danny's doing this whole soldier thing, like, look at the general, look at him do this thing, is that I feel like everything he says is completely unjustified because he like makes fun of the Doctor for wanting to turn off his emotional inhibitor. I'm like, he's literally offering to do what you want. He'll turn on the emotional inhibitor for you, and you're throwing this nonsense in his face about him like not wanting to do it, and then Clara's like, here, give me the sonic screwdriver, I'll do it. And then Danny's like, oh yes, General, always got to keep his hands clean. I'm like, Clara literally asked for the sonic screwdriver. It's not like the Doctor was just like, here, you do it, Clara, because I don't want to. Clara literally was like, give it to me, do as you're told. Like, if anything, Clara is the General in this situation, giving orders to the Doctor.
Yeah, maybe he's talking about her, because she's the Doctor, right?
It's just like... ingenious comeback.
Oh, that changes everything. It changes everything I thought about this episode. This was the point where I yelled at the television set because he told Clara to just point and think, and that's like, that is not how the sonic screwdriver works.
It actually is, according to the reboot. It's just how it works in the reboot. I'm sure there's been a throwaway line at this point, or maybe it's coming up. There's a throwaway line where the Doctor says something like, it attunes to your brain frequencies and it does what you want, or something like that.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, you do have to point the sonic screwdriver, I mean, as far as we know, and you do have to think. Like, if you're not thinking, you're not going to operate it, right? So maybe there is like a button press or something involved, right? But there's also, maybe he's just leaving out.
But at this point, it just becomes a magic wand. Yeah. It's Expelliarmus.
It is a magic wand. It's always been a magic wand. That's why J&T blew it up in the Visitation.
But I remember, the golden age, power of the Daleks, where they actually used it as a screwdriver.
Well, I remember in what was it, Empty Child Doctor Dances, written by Moffat, where like they had to like fix the barbed wire, and the doctors like set it to like setting 5,842 or something like that. He actually had to like fiddle around and
Well, maybe the TARDIS upgraded it when it blew up in the 11th hour.
I guess.
I think this episode,
same Sonic, different casing.
Just more testament to the unstable continuity of the show.
Yeah, I mean, I don't care about the sonic screwdriver that much. My main problem with this scene is Danny he's basically just insulting the Doctor for doing what Danny wants. Danny wants him to turn off his emotional inhibitor, and the Doctor's like, yeah, I need to or turn it on, sorry. And he's like, yeah, I need to turn it on to get access to the Cybermen's plan. And then Danny's like, see that? All shred of humanity thrown away for a tactical advantage. And you literally want him to turn it on. Why are you like insulting him for wanting to turn it on?
Yeah, you mean you don't...
It's like a win-win situation for you guys. Danny gets what he wants, the Doctor gets what he wants, but Danny's just over here. I just said the Danny, so I guess he's companion. Danny's over here.
Have we said the Clara yet?
No, we haven't.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, you don't throw vitriol at
the people doing what I want them to do? No.
You're missing out there.
Am I?
Yeah.
Wow.
It can be a lot of fun.
What? I just think I just don't get it, I guess. And I think it's unnecessary. I think like this was an opportunity for Danny and the Doctor to have like a real come to Jesus moment where they like
they find religion at the end.
Where they like
what if
actually
this was
like
all just like a lesson of like that wasn't heaven. Heaven is
the real heaven is inside. No, but where they like gain some mutual respect for each other and like actually realize that they're both just like doing the best they can with this life that they're given. But instead, Danny just like takes this opportunity to shit all over the Doctor for another 5 minutes.
Who else but Danny Pink?
But then from that point onward, I like it. After Danny gets his punches in, I like it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, at this point, I have to point out, have you ever read the Virgin New Adventure novel Love and War by Paul Cornell?
Not yet. It's on the list somewhere.
Okay, because I think Paul Cornell should have gotten a, based on the story by credit for this sequence here, because spoilers here, but Love and War is basically a story about a planet called Heaven, which has been invaded by a fungus that transforms the dead into living zombies. And the resolution of the story is that the Doctor sends the love interest of his companion, who is possessed by this fungus, and convinces him to fly off, because apparently this guy has the power to, he's kind of like the Human Torch. He can like flame on and do that. So he convinces him to fly out there and set the skies afire to save this planet.
Interesting. I mean, it's like the Neil Gaiman parallels between Doctor's wife and Nineveh, right? We don't really know how much, we don't. I guess I assume Steven Moffat's a pretty big Doctor Who fan. So,
well, Moffat was really active back in the dark days of the internet, the Usenet, and he was posting his crackpot ideas on Records Doctor Who, which later went on and wrote scripts out of those.
Can you imagine all the crackpot ideas we came up with on this podcast made it into this show?
One day, The Rock will be the Doctor.
Well, I mean, I guess my point was we don't know if Moffat had ever read this book, if he had ever.
I mean, if it's a one-for-one thing.
If he didn't, it's a huge coincidence, and I don't really believe.
I mean, that was the thing with the Doctor's wife in Nineveh. Like, the plot was extremely similar with the Doctor landing on a planet in another galaxy and building a TARDIS landing on a TARDIS junkyard, building a TARDIS out of scraps to save a being who wants to jump to our dimension. The similarities are like overwhelming, but Neil Gaiman like adamantly denies ever hearing about that story or reading it before writing his own story. I mean, there's such a large like volume of media out there now that I feel like almost any story you can like pick up references,
nothing new under the sun,
or similarities to a story that's been written at some point. I mean, that's why a lot of the things like, if you come up with a story, just write it, because the story's probably not going to be unique, but your execution will be. Yeah,
the way you rearrange, it's like you only have 12 notes on the scale, and it's how you arrange notes and how you play. It's not only how you arrange notes, it's how you put emphasis on some notes over others. It's the emotion that you put behind it. It's how you develop it from one idea to the next. That's it, you have to find a way to make it unique and to make it your. I mean, there's a quote from Terrence Dicks, something about all you have to do is come up with a good story. It doesn't have to be your story, but
right.
That sounds like something Terry Nation would say.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just putting my English major hat back on for a second here. I mean, all the great like writers of English literature, their stories are what we would today call plagiarism. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Chaucer, Shakespeare, Milton, all of them. So
again, it's all in the execution.
Yeah.
The story's probably been done.
Yep.
But how you tell the story is maybe unique. I'm not going to say it'll always be unique.
I think Moffat just basically did enough. I think we practically just like erased the names and wrote his character names.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'd have to read
place locales. Yeah, it's actually also available as a Big Finish audio.
Right. I think that was their first novel adaptation they did. I think was that one.
I think it was. Yeah, I think it was Big Finish's very first attempt at doing, and they did a really good job. I mean, Sophie Aldred and Sylvester McCoy. They have a real. I mean, they kind of have. They sort of subverted it because we had the big blow up scene with the Doctor and companion at the end of Love and War, and here we just move it to the beginning with Clara and 12.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to read the story to know how similar it is, but from what you're saying, it sounds pretty similar.
Like exactly almost the same thing. But yeah, that happens. We get some more Iron Men, Cybermen.
Well, Danny then goes like full soldier mode, which just kind of makes you wonder, like, why has he been like, dumping all over the Doctor for being a general?
It, I guess that's probably why he's been bashing the Doctor, because he didn't want to embrace it.
I think that was something that we did mention in the beginning of the season, that part of the reason why he might be like taking it out on the Doctor is because he never like accepted himself as a soldier.
Yeah. So this part, like, again, I like all this stuff that's happening, once they get to the graveyard. I get this. I like it.
They fly off, they blow up, which vaporizes the clouds. Apparently, I guess that's how cyber clouds work. And then Clara's about to destroy Missy, I guess is the word.
Yeah.
And the Doctor's like, I'm not going to let you do this. And Clara's like, why? Because she's your friend? And the Doctor's like, well, I mean, I didn't say I wasn't going to kill her. I just said I wasn't going to let you do it.
Yeah, or something along those lines.
And Missy's like, wow, really?
I think he says, I didn't say I was trying to save her. I'm just stopping you from killing her, something like that.
Yeah, he says he's not. Yeah, basically that. And then, so he's about to kill her, and Missy's like, oh, so you're doing it to save her soul, but who's going to save yours, Doctor? And then right when he's about to shoot her, she gets shot by Bravo Moffat. It's the Brigadier.
I don't know about you guys, but I really liked this.
I don't have a problem with it. I don't have a problem with it.
I still have issues. I'm still very conflicted about this. I think at the time I thought it was very cheap, and it was very, because I think we had the nice tribute to the Brigadier at the Husbands of River Song, where 11 called him up and it's like, hey, let's go, and it's like, oh, I'm sorry, he died not too long ago, and he always had a glass of brandy here, for you, just in case you stopped by. And that was really nice. That was a nice way of remembering Nicholas Courtney and the character of the Brigadier. But I don't know. And plus that raises a lot of questions. I mean, who else is out there? Does that mean that Amy and Rory are now Cybermen because they're dead and buried? They're probably flying. What about Adric?
Yep, probably. Actually, no. You know what? Adric probably isn't a Cyberman because he crashed into the planet.
He got vaporized.
But also he crashed when the dinosaurs were things, so I don't think there were humans living with the concept of an afterlife at that point.
Damn.
We forgot to mention that the reason why Missy did this whole thing is to give the Doctor an army.
Right.
We forgot the Doctor's speech, which I also really liked, where he's like, I just realized who I am. He's like, I'm not a good man. I'm not a bad man. I'm just an idiot with a box trying to help out.
Yeah, that was cool. She also gave him a bracelet to, like, command the dead.
But he gives that to Danny.
Right.
To P.E. And, yeah, the Brigadier is the one who shoots the Master. I remember when this aired, there was like a huge uproar about this because everyone's like, you can't do this. It's like desecrating the Brigadier's corpse. But again, I didn't have a problem with it. I do think it ties back into when Kate was like, the only thing he wanted was for you to salute him. And like the final thing the Doctor does before the Brigadier flies off is he salutes the Brigadier.
And thanks him.
the doctor says something like, of course, in my darkest hour, where who else would be there but you, or something like that.
Yeah, but I think that was I don't know. I just thought that maybe that was the whole point, that was basically the thing that Moffat was trying to lead us to. This whole story was just so we can have the doctor salute the brigadier. I'm still very conflicted about it. It doesn't bother me as much now, but I remember at the time I was pretty incensed.
No, I definitely get that, and one thing that like it boggles my mind that like after all these characters that we've come to know and I guess either love or not in the new series, it's the classic characters like the Brig that like they're still like the best characters in the show.
Well, that's
in a way.
That's the one problem I do have with the Brigadier's inclusion in this, and the Doctor saluting the Brigadier, is that it does. It introduces this idea that the whole like the Doctor being a soldier thing could have been done way better with like Kate. Kate being the daughter of a soldier, trying to reform UNIT to be a more scientific organization. And then you could have this whole thing where the Doctor's like...
And failing.
Where everyone's like, well, the Doctor's a soldier, and the Doctor's part of UNIT, so maybe we should follow his example. And Kate being like, no, I'm trying to break away from that. And everyone's like, well, the Brigadier was a soldier too. UNIT used to be a military organization. Like, I think...
Yeah, that could have been really good. And she's obviously, not completely, but she's obviously not really succeeding at making UNIT less militaristic, as this episode indicates. So, no, that could be really good.
She's trying her damnedest, though. And that's, yeah. And including the Brigadier does, like, bring that up. Like, the Brigadier was a soldier, and the Doctor worked closely with the Brigadier for many, many years.
Mm-hmm. And never saw eye to eye with him. I mean, not always, didn't always see eye to eye with the
Never
Brigadier.
Never going to let the Brigadier live down, killing all the Silurians.
We didn't mention that Kate is still alive.
Yeah, because Cyber Brig caught her.
Right.
Because the Doctor's like, how is that possible? Of course.
He says, I guess we don't know for sure, but he says the Brig must have caught her.
Yeah, because love is a promise, not an emotion.
Yeah.
The Brig loves his daughter.
Yeah.
I guess.
Didn't we make this point already with Craig and the baby?
Craig. Love Craig. Craig is one of the best new series characters. Craig and Mickey, those are the people I'm going to be remembering 20 years from now.
You're not going to remember Riggsy? He's going to come back next season. I was scrolling.
He comes back.
Yeah, I was scrolling through the next season just for a little preview and saw that Riggsy comes back. I think you actually mentioned that.
Yeah, I did. I mentioned that in Flatline. I was like, spoilers, Riggsy comes back.
I forgot, and then I saw his name.
We get some kind of epilogue stuff going on here.
2 weeks later. We get some like 80s style freeze frames of where they are now.
Missy tells Doctor that Gallifrey's back. You have to just go to these coordinates, find Gallifrey. And so he goes out there. He punches in the coordinates. And he opens the door, so there's nothing out there, of course. And then
this is done through flashback, though. We should mention. Continuing that.
Yes. And then we just have this. At the time, I thought this was like the most heart-wrenching scene, where the Doctor just walks to the console and just pounds the fuck out of it. And it's I remember actually crying a bit because this was like so gut punching. And then I turned around and was like, well, this was probably an outtake. This is probably Capaldi being frustrated with the lackluster scripts that he's gotten. It's like, I deserve better than this.
Well, I think the most heart-wrenching scene is after that. Well, before we get there, Clara, Danny communicates from the other side. I guess he's still alive in the nethersphere, and Clara's like, yeah, the bracelet, you can use it to come through. And he's like, only enough energy for one trip. And he sends the boy through instead of himself.
Yeah,
which we already discussed.
But then I think the most heart-wrenching scene here is when the Doctor and Clara meet up, and they just both lie to each other about how good their life is doing. Clara's like, yeah, Danny and I were going to do great. And the Doctor's like, yeah, I totally found Gallifrey. I'm going to go back, be with my people. And we see the flashbacks that the Doctor's not finding Gallifrey, and Clara, like, having the boy come through instead of Danny. And it's just like this total gut punch, where they're just lying to each other because they both think the other person is happy with their life, so they lie so that they can do what they think the other person wants. So the Doctor's lying because he thinks Clara doesn't want to travel with him anymore, and Clara's lying because she thinks the Doctor is going to go back to Gallifrey.
Yeah, again, I like this thing at the end where the culmination of this season is like them trying not to like traumatize each other in the sense that they don't want to reveal that, hey, like what we, tried to do and what we were working towards before, like didn't work out.
And the culmination is that they're both like blatantly lying to each other, and this whole season was like, Clara's a great liar, the Doctor's a great liar. And then at the final scene between the two of them is they just lie through their teeth to each other.
Find out that your lies will set you free.
Yeah, it's like Keon says, you just got to keep track of who you lie to.
Yeah, you just have to keep lying until the lie is big enough to just engulf everything.
So that concludes Series 8. Of Doctor Who.
I really thought that Clara was going out here, and I mean, of course she was supposed to. And I was like, man, this is an excellent write, especially when they go to the TARDIS.
I think that would have been that would have been a good way of doing it. It would have been the logical way for their story to end.
Yeah, exactly.
They was just too. I mean, I think they started, she became addicted. I mean, as we're going to see in Series 9, she's going to be addicted to all the time traveling and all the danger. And for some reason, I just don't see why the Doctor is so enamored with Clara. I don't get it. I just don't understand,
I mean, it's a prototypical codependent relationship where, when you're in a codependent relationship, it's difficult to see any possibility outside of it, which is why when Clara leaves, it has to end the way that it does. Not that I think Moffat should have done that. But the kind of whole thing about this is that both of them, I think, know that it's toxic, but you can't leave because you can't imagine your life without that person. The 12th Doctor... The first face the 12th Doctor saw was Clara. The 12th Doctor's been traveling with Clara. He's literally his entire life. Clara basically has nothing left except for the Doctor, and for both of them, it's an opportunity cost where it's easier to stay in this relationship, even though it may not be the best one.
But I think at that point. It's all too painful for them to continue. I think at that point, Clarice is like, if every time I look at you now, I'm just going to think of, it's kind of like why Tegan left at the end. It's like, I'm sick of all the death and destruction, and I need a break from it. So if we were going to write out Clara at this point, then that would have been a very logical way of doing it. It's just like, look, it's too painful for me now, and for the doctors, and the Doctor being understanding. It's like, okay, I'm gonna let her go, but I'm gonna make it easier on her and make her think that, oh well, I'm gonna go back to Gallifrey now and do whatever. So they're lying to each other just to soften the blow.
Well, I mean, this is my problem with Clara's write-out in general, is that Moffat consistently writes her out in better ways before her final write-out. Like, he consistently proposes better ways for her to go out, and then just being like, oh, just kidding. Just forget about that. Just forget about that. Like, this week, I think, would have been a brilliant write-out. Even next week, I think, like, would have been a heartbreaking and, like... Oh, yeah. Like a totally heartbreaking but brilliant write-out as well. And then he's just kidding. And you can, like, the worst thing about the next write-out next week is that you can, like, really blatantly tell what scene they added afterwards to undo the write-outs. But I guess that could lead us into talking about the season as a whole and how the, how it works. How it works as a season. Does it even work?
I know. This is what I wrote down. This is like I have my the good, the bad, the not bad, and the overrated. And for the good episodes, I put down Deep Breath because I thought that was an excellent way of starting series. I thought the Capaldi and Colm. I think that they would the scene in the restaurant. If we had more scenes like that between Capaldi and Coleman. I think that would have been probably more of a traditional doctor-companion relationship.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It would have been more fun. I am actually one of the few people who liked Robot of Sherwood.
I liked it too.
I did as well. I liked any of the non-Danny Pink episodes, really.
Simple and to the point.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Mummy on the Orient Express, I think, is probably the best one out of the series.
I really liked that one too. Keon did not.
It was better than the ones that heavily featured Danny Pink, for sure.
Right.
But
basing your entire season around Danny Pink, I see.
Yes.
Like Moffat did.
Yes.
But then we have The Caretaker and Kill the Moon and In the Forest of the Night. I've not heard what you said about In the Forest of the Night yet, but that
incredibly
mediocre,
dull, underwhelming. Actually, I think is how I described it.
Yeah.
It
was okay.
Missed potential.
Yeah, Flatline wasn't too bad, but I think Listen was very overrated.
I liked that one. I liked it.
It was done much better when it was called Midnight.
I think it's just Steven Moffat does Hyde, if I'm being honest.
There's some Hyde stuff in there.
There's some, but there's also some like the knocking of the door and like what's out there and everything.
Kind of.
The one thing I did kind of like about this season is like I can see this overarching thing of like trauma. It's there in the first, it's there from the beginning, and it all culminates, I think, in these 2 episodes type thing. So that was all right. It's just how it was executed.
Yeah, I think that if they would have focused on trauma and not, the doctor hates soldiers, which I think is a false premise to begin with.
Well, I think it was just that they oversimplified the trauma aspect to the doctor hates soldiers. Danny thinks the doctor's a soldier, and
yeah. So maybe this season is like, I don't know, Fear Her just expanded into a full season.
Did you just call Series 8 the Fear Her of the seasons?
I guess so.
That's far from the truth. I definitely think there are much worse seasons than this.
No, but I mean, you say like it oversimplifies some of the trauma type thing. I think Fear Her is an episode that really oversimplified, like, because the dad in that episode was abusive, right? I'm not remembering that incorrectly.
They never said it, but yeah, it was basically like it was like on the cusp of being outright said.
Yeah, and I think
again, you can only do so much in a 45-minute episode.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess my overall ranking of the season is just missed potential.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I would agree with that. There was so much missed potential. I think there could have been so many interesting directions that it could have gone that they set up. But then Moffat loses interest, and it's like, no, we have to have the big ending. We have to have the cyber brig. We have to have the doctor not finding Gallifrey. We have to have, the revelation of Missy being the master, which was like the worst kept secret.
Well, here's the thing. I know this is probably a pretty unpopular opinion. Is like I don't necessarily care for Missy all that much, or Michelle Gomez as the master. I like the John Sim master lot more.
Well, I think that's a symptom of her mystery being part of the overall plotline of the season. So that they tried to keep this mystery about her, so they didn't really give you a lot to go on, because then you'd be like, oh, it's the master, right? If we got as much as we got of her in this episode over the course of the entire season, it would have been like brutally obvious. And I don't think you'd be saying that. I think when she really comes into her own, when we get more episodes with her in it, I think I do think that this season is like, much like I think it is for Capaldi, the lowest of her performances.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's only uphill from here. JB still disagrees with me, but I think it's all uphill from here, boys. Save for at least 2 episodes in series 10.
We just went through the first loop on the roller coaster, when there's going to be much more to come.
Oh boy! No, okay, JB. I wanted to ask you.
Yes.
A lot of people think that Moffat should have left with Matt Smith. Do you think that's the case? Or do you think he should have, stayed on as he did, with Capaldi?
I think at that point, I remember at that point after Death in Heaven, I said this was his time to go. I was willing to give him one more season with a new Doctor. I was just, let's just see if we can change course. But at that point, I just thought, well, Moffat was just, I thought he was just out of ideas and he was just starting to regurgitate the same stories over and over. And I think that I would have liked to have seen Capaldi under another showrunner. I don't necessarily think it would have been Chris. I don't necessarily think Chris Chibnall would have been good for Capaldi.
Let me pose to you then, if he left now, say where we are in the show, I mean, who could you possibly see replacing him though? Because I think even if you think he should have left, in my opinion, I think that him staying would have been better than any quote heir apparent unquote that I could see taking his place.
Well, we go back. It's back to the John Nathan Turner conundrum, because if he would have left the show, there would have been no one else to take over the show. The only reason he stayed 10 years is that no one else wanted to take it on. And,
well, I mean, Terrence Dudley wanted it, and I'm pretty sure J&T just shredded that application.
Yeah. I think I at the time I thought maybe Toby Whithouse would have been a good candidate for showrunner.
Yeah. I know Toby Whithouse's name was thrown around a lot in the fandom circles when they were announcing who was going to replace Moffat. I know a lot of people threw around Jamie Matheson's name as well.
Yeah, I think Matheson could have. I think he needed a couple more scripts to prove himself as a showrunner. A lot of people were also saying Mark Gatiss, but I just no. We just Gatiss is like Moffat's toady, pretty much. And then when I remember when Chibnall was announced, I was kind of. It was like the air let out of the balloon, really, because it's like, okay, well, it's going to be boring, but it's not going to be. I mean, and Chibnall at the time, I thought Chibnall his one strength was that he was able to write character. He was able to develop character, because I thought what he did with Amy and Rory was very interesting, and I was hoping that we were going to get some character development. Spoilers, not that much as far as the companions.
Hey, Graham got a lot. The other two got short shafted, but Graham got a lot.
Nice homage to the classic show, where it was just the Doctor and like maybe 1-2 for lucky companions actually doing anything.
Yeah.
Wouldn't call it an homage so much as potentially an oversight.
A parody.
I don't know. I just think that even if Moffat had left here, that I think that what we get out of Moffat in the next 2 seasons is far superior to what we would have gotten from a new showrunner coming in at this point with Capaldi.
I'm imagining Neil Cross and Capaldi.
And I'm imagining how it would be extremely divisive and he would run out of ideas pretty quickly.
He's only written 2 episodes of Doctor Who.
I tell you
only
what.
2. But that's the thing, is that it's only 2. When Moffat came in, he had written 5 or 6 at that point and had been involved in the show for a while. Same with, when Russell T came in, he had written a bloody Dark Years novel for the show, right? When Chris Chibnall came in, he's written, 7, 8 stories, and he worked on Torchwood. These people who take over the show kind of have a long pedigree, and Neil Cross would have come in almost as an outsider, and I think that would have divided a lot of people in fandom.
Yeah, you need fresh blood, new talent, untouched, untainted with the history of Doctor Who.
Yeah, but sometimes you get the TV movie.
Yeah, that gives you something like that. It could have been good, I wouldn't rule it out, but I just think that the experience may or may not have been necessary.
I think at that time, Moffat he was doing Sherlock at the same time. I think he was spreading himself way too thin, and he kept hype. And the way he would hype up the upcoming season 9, this is going to be big, and it's going to be, we're going to. I remember when he basically teased the opener of season 9, where I think he says that or actually, no, this was like back in series 6, where he's like, someone's going to die in the opening episode, and it ended up being
the Doctor.
Exactly.
That was the biggest twist out, for being honest.
And it's like, you're not going to kill the Doctor off. You're not going to kill Superman. Superman always comes back. It's just,
I would have been like, bravo, Moffat, if he just killed off the doctor right
the
there.
one time one of those things actually results in like, okay, the doctor's actually dead. It's going to be, the wool has been pulled over our eyes so far, but one day.
I just think that Moffat was hyping. He was too much hype, and he was busy writing Sherlock at the same time. And at that point, there was no one to take over the reins. So Moffat I think he was out of ideas at that point. And I still think it would have been nice to maybe see someone else take the reins at this point. It's going to be interesting. I mean, because I know Keon has not seen. He's watching these as they're reviewing them. And I know you've seen them all, Dylan. Mm-hmm. So I think you should pose that question again 2 seasons from now.
Well, I still think we're about to enter the Moffat Renaissance period, in my opinion. We just passed through the Dark Ages, now we get the Renaissance.
I mean, just speaking as someone who's, like you just mentioned, JB, only watched up until this point, I would be okay with seeing someone else, whoever that might be, in an alternate hypothetical world, take over at this point. I mean, Moffat has been. I will
say that, I mean, aside from the Moffat scripts, I mean, we're going to see some more scripts from Jamie Matheson. We're going to see a couple of scripts by Sarah Dollard, who I think was the one person who really got Capaldi, who really wrote to Capaldi's strengths.
Well, we're going to see Cottrell Boyce writes another script, which I think is good.
Which one?
You sound very unsure.
He wrote Smile. It was the second episode of Series 10. He also wrote In the Forest of the Night last week. We're going to get the guy who wrote Kill the Moon. I'm forgetting his name at this point. He writes
Peter Harness.
Peter Harness writes the Zygon 2-parter with Moffat next season, which I think is just a brilliant story. We're going to get a lot of good stories, I think, coming up. Like I said, the Moffat Renaissance era begins now.
Oh, boy.
Oh, wait, just kidding. It begins next week. We got to get through Last Christmas first.
Yeah, because we didn't mention the episode actually ends with fake-out credits, and then Santa shows up in the TARDIS.
Ah, yeah, I forgot about that. I totally forgot about that.
Now, okay, so I've heard
we can't end that because this is like the most depressing episode of Doctor Who I've ever seen up until that point. I wanted to slit my wrist after watching it the first time round. I really did. It's just like, you're going to end it this way? Really?
But they brighten up the mood with the promise of gifts.
Gifts and merriment at Christmas.
Okay, so I've heard that, I don't know how popular Doctor Who is in like Northern Europe and like the Nordic countries, but I've heard in those countries it's tradition for Santa to come to your door, like someone in town or whatever dresses up as Santa and comes to your door. So wow. I wonder how much of a shock this would have been for them, right? It's typical thing, like Santa, shows up at your. I know it's a very specific Santa. Point, but
yeah, that's a real specific question.
But
you
gotta wonder. You gotta wonder.
Do you have to wonder? Can I just opt not to?
Well, I've planted the seed of wonder in your head. So.
I'm gonna forget it as soon as we turn off the microphones, like I always do.
It's like a test, right? As soon as you take the test, you just discard all the information.
I was going to say this podcast exists in like a bubble universe. Anything we say outside the podcast never makes it under recording. And I always forget everything we say on the podcast when we start recording. Oh, boy. Well, I'm actually out of things to say, surprisingly. Thank you, JB, for being on the episode.
Yeah, thank you.
It was a lot of fun.
Thank you. I really enjoyed my time here with you guys, and I'm really enjoying the podcast. And I'm still kind of diving into your back catalog, just sort of randomly. But I'm looking forward to what you guys think about the Moffat Renaissance.
Well, that's a good key into the fact that we never actually mentioned this on the podcast, but we did go back and rename all our episodes slightly to add the name of the episode/serial that we watched in the title of the episode so that it's easier to find what you're looking for on iTunes or Google Play. So, but I'd definitely be open to having you on again if there's some point in the future you want to be on again.
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. I'll put some thought into it. Maybe when you get to Jodie, I'll come back.
Yeah, that would actually be good timing. I think that'd probably be near the end of this year. But in the meantime, while we have to wait to hear from you again, where can we find all of your stuff,
Okay, well, my podcast is Who 37, a Doctor Who podcast. My website is who37.com. You can find me on iTunes. I also have a Facebook page, Who 37, a Doctor Who podcast. You can also find me on Stitcher. Anywhere you can find podcasts, you can find Who 37 there. I'm actually getting a lot of downloads. I got like over 700 downloads last month, which is kind of incredible because I haven't done Who 37 since January. It's in a hiatus at the moment, but it might be coming back. We'll wait and see. In the meantime, I'm also doing a Batman 1970s podcast, which is called Bat 77, My 70s Batman Childhood, where I look back at all the incarnations of Batman in the 1970s. I've reviewed the 1977 Filmation Batman series, his appearances on Scooby-Doo, all the Power Records stories. Soon I'm going to be doing a deep dive into the Batman and Detective Comics runs in the 1970s. It's going to take me at least 2 years to get through all that.
Wow, that sounds exciting. I do have one question, though. Why 37?
Okay, well, I have a license plate. When I used to drive, back when I lived in St. Louis, when I went to get my vanity plate, I wanted to get Who Won. Unfortunately, 36 other people in the state of Illinois had the same idea. So I came out as Who 37, which actually was very fortuitous because I was 37 years old when two things happened that was actually in my life that kind of ties into the podcast. One, I moved to Chicago, and two, that was the year in 2005 when Doctor Who came back. And so I had this license plate on my wall, and I actually had set up my closet as a recording studio because I write and record my own music. I actually wrote the theme songs to my own podcast. So when I wanted to do a podcast, I started in 2013, and because it was during the big anniversary year, and I wanted to get back into Doctor Who fandom, and this was the way I wanted to do it. And I wanted to do podcasting for some time. So really, it's just the name of the podcast. It's named after the license plate.
Huh.
Well, that's awesome.
That's pretty cool, actually. That's pretty cool. Well, again, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
And if anyone would like to email us, you can reach us at thedoctor@decorativevegetable.com. Questions, comments, concerns, angry rants, love letters, your thoughts on Steven Moffat and the upcoming, I swear it's a renaissance. You can find us on Apple Podcasts and Google Play at Trust Your Doctor. You can find us on YouTube at Decorative Vegetable. Be sure to leave a rating if you like the show.
Check us out on Facebook, Trust Your Doctor. Like us on Facebook. Also check us out on Twitter at TYD Podcast and follow us on Twitter. And next time we're going to be watching Last Christmas. So thanks again, JB. And
thank you, JB.
Until
Thank
then,
you.
The end.